Hello, folks. I'm Brett Kinsella, founder of Synthedia, VoiceBot.ai, and your host for GAIN, the Generative AI News Rundown. We do this every week at, well, almost every week, Thursday at 11 a.m. At least that's where we are today, depending on logistics. Happy to have everybody here today, and a lot of people will be joining pretty quickly. And as per usual, I have there we go. This is what I wanted right there. I've got my co-host, Eric Schwartz. Hey, Eric.
Hey, excited to get started.
Okay, so we've had a couple interesting weeks. I think I really characterized last week as sort of the week of little stories. And this week, or at least the past 5 days, has been the week of big stories. And it may be the biggest set of stories that we've seen, like a collection of big set of stories since the spring. I'm thinking we had a cluster of them in February, we had a cluster in April, and then the last week of August, we had sort of some big hits. But usually we're doing one or two big stories, and it seems like there's a lot this week.
Yeah, it's not that there's really slow news days with generative AI, but this week was a lot of trying to write everything before the next big story comes out a couple hours later.
Yeah, exactly. Just like always on the back foot. And it started over the weekend. And so let's get right into it. But before I do that, if you're on LinkedIn, if you're on YouTube, just give us a like. Let us know you're out there. Just tell us in the comments, and ask questions, make comments, all those other types of things. We work it into the show. I think most of the folks who come here know that, but I just want to let you know you're sort of welcome to do that. In fact, we want to know who you are, where you're from, and what you think about these types of things. Okay, so the first story today we're going to talk about is Grok. Now, you might think we should be talking about GPTs or the DDOS attack and OpenAI and all these other things. We're going to get to that in just a minute. But I don't want Grok to get lost in all of that, because Grok was the story over the weekend, sort of brilliant timing. And I guess, Elon Musk is pretty good at marketing. He knows how to get people excited about all these types of things. Hey, Alan Furstenberg, how you doing, my friend? Alan's been doing a lot of developer hours and coverage in the space. So definitely people who are he's in LinkedIn right now. If he's in LinkedIn chat, if you want to know more about developing in this space, just ping him there. A lot of good stuff. But let's go back to Grok. So Grok, I got his X.ai's chatbot for Twitter. And is it really better than ChatGPT? And I want to walk through a couple different things, because it is interesting. We have alternatives to ChatGPT, Bard, Bing Chat. There's a lot of different things out there. Poe, Claude 2 is probably the one that most people would sort of go to. But Grok is interesting, sort of a different angle. So I laid out a couple of different things about this that I think we can do a quick rundown on. So it's an assistant, right? So it is like a ChatGPT type of thing. A key difference is they talk about it being based on real-time data because it's got the Twitter graph behind it. And it also has the internet. It's not just the Twitter graph. And it also has all the training data that it's done. And it's a very strong team there. And so they've done some interesting things from that. Whether you think having real-time access to Twitter or to X posts is like good or bad, or like that's a different story. But it does have that, and they're really pushing the immediacy, and we'll see. It is based on a new LLM. It's called Grok 1. They started with Grok 0, which is a 33 billion parameter LLM. I believe Grok 1 is also 33 billion, although it's not actually entirely clear. You could intuit that, but it might actually be slightly larger. It has a 8K data token or context window. So that's consistent with sort of the lower end of GPT-4. And it's up to data in Q3 2023, which I believe the cutoff is actually the end of June. That's sort of the way I read that. More interestingly, they publish some benchmarks, as people often do. And basically they put themselves for the selected benchmark tests that they have. So this isn't like the OpenAI leaderboard. It's not the For Luther AI. It's just like they sort of cherry picked a few here, which might be good. So MMLU is one that a lot of people will know. Human eval is another one that's pretty popular. GSM 8K, and then math. And if you look at the table, and they use published data for the other models and then for theirs. basically they say it sort of fits between GPT 3.5 and Palm, with Claude 2 and GPT 4 being slightly better. And it's kind of interesting. They're coming in. They're not saying we're the best. It's like, we're very good. We're better than GPT 3.5, which would have been most people's ChatGPT experience up until this week, as they moved into the transition. And they're saying, hey, this is like our first model. We're rolling it out in beta. And you can imagine they think they're going to be better than this, at least for certain types of things. Now, how much this matters is a different story, because they're not trying to sell the API like Google with Palm, Anthropic with Claude, OpenAI with GPT-4 or GPT 3.5. They're really just trying to get you to use the chatbot. Okay, so that's the third thing. Fourth thing, Grok supports the super app strategy, which we can talk more about. But in any event, we have this idea of a super app coming out of most notably out of China. Like, we just have everything in one app. And this is something that Musk has talked about in the past. A chatbot that like ties into lots of things, not just pulls in knowledge, but creates a way for you to do other things, make transactions, those types of things. It might actually enable that. It sort of gets you beyond just, I read posts, I make posts, I read posts, I make posts, right? So that's, I think, an important thing. It has a personality. One of the things that I think is noteworthy is in the voice assistant space, it's like all the voice assistants had some sort of personality baked in. Think about that affective trust, that emotional bond. In the generative AI chat space, they try to be as far away from that as possible. It's just like, I don't know, there is no personality here. That's changing now with the MyGPTs, which we'll talk about. There's a couple of maybe a couple of other examples, but Grok really comes out and it's like kind of be like sarcastic and edgy and that type of thing. It's not multimodal, so I'm not sure that matters that much to people. I mean, I think it's like people get excited about it, but I think they're still using text in, text out mostly. But it's not multimodal, and they're very clear about that. They're like, basically this is like, they're saying, hey, that we're sort of where ChatGPT was a year ago, but we're inside of Twitter. And will that become the ChatGPT alternative? And I think that's really sort of the key point that I've been thinking about a lot is ChatGPT. We learned this week, 100 million weekly active users, sort of the dominant player in the space, the one that everybody seems to know about. But who's the alternative, right? Who and it's not even like who might be at parity with them. It's just like, who's like the second best option, even if it's a small market share. Eric, I just did the big rundown.
Yeah.
What do you take from all this?
I mean, there's a lot, as is with most things this week. Actually, there's a large announcement containing several still very large sub elements, and I think a couple of the key points are one is that when Musk took ownership of formerly Twitter, now X, one of the things he did was stop OpenAI and other generative AI developers from scraping data from the social media site, which had been used for training. And obviously now that potential training data is being funneled into Grok, which is potentially very useful for it. Although with the shift in the social media site itself, who knows whether that matters for how it's being trained. And then the two things I think are important is it actually better on like a technical level or for technical purposes? And I think based on their benchmarks, it's supposed to be, but that'll be tested by third parties more before that kind of judgment is made. And the other thing is that as with most certainly consumer facing technology, there's the technology itself, then there's the marketing around it. And Musk himself and several others made a much bigger deal about how it's a different kind of personality, because as we've talked about ChatGPT and some of these other AIs, they have, even if it's a very professional reserved personality, they still have a personality, and Grok is being aimed very much as not that personality, or being more flippant, or more willing to be sarcastic, or use humor versus straightforward responses when it feels warranted. And I think that when you say will it be an alternative, the question is, it will be an alternative for users, and especially on the enterprise side, for companies that are okay with a very different approach to the kind of guardrails that sometimes limit LLMs in other cases.
Yeah, and I don't see this as a company angle at all. I think this is essentially consumer. It could be prosumer. It could be your mix, your professional And I understand what you're saying along those lines, but I just don't think that that's where they're headed. I think, you know, if you think of Twitter X as a consumer platform that businesses happen to use, and so I think it's like the individual led solution right now. My guess is that if it is popular, it becomes a tool for the Twitter super users, and then maybe a few other people try it, and that might not be a terrible outcome right now, because if it just gets a few more people who are Twitter loyalists, or X, sorry, or like to use X, if you just get a few more of them to subscribe and stick around, and use it, and then a few other people maybe to join, and then use that all as just like training data, and you know, to make it better. I think it could actually be good. You know, Twitter is or X is it's a really interesting space, because it's like, how do I use this? And there's all these techniques around curation and then spreading spreading information, not disinformation, spreading information, my friends. It's like, you know, what is the utility? And it is a ton of utility. I mean, it's maybe, as Alan was saying, maybe it was a little more utility a year ago, because I think a lot of people, but it's always had the people who were tastemakers, influencers, the people who were making news, who were reporting on news. And to the extent that they can pull that back in, and this is a tool for that, and then expand a little bit what you can do with it, it's logically, it makes sense.
Yeah, and I guess I agree with you about the sort of super users on X, because again, it is something you have to pay for. So it's not really aimed at the people who, they like ChatGPT. They're willing to, they don't want to pay for it, but they're like, oh yeah, every so often I'll go check on it and use it. Or, it's great for certain projects, or if I'm trying to like just come up with a tastefully worded email or something like that. But those are not the same people who are paying for super user access on any social media site. So I don't know if the super users are enough to make it worthwhile, because of course the other thing is that it's expensive to run LLMs. It's expensive to do those kinds of things. So yes, you're making money by, if you have subscribers, then you're offsetting those costs. But honestly, based on what Sam Altman and some of the other developers have said, it's really expensive. I don't know if $22 from individuals will offset those costs enough to keep those GPUs running.
Yeah, and it's 16 if you go direct. I think it's 22 if you do it through the App Store. And you have to understand too that that's basically just a lift on what they were already charging people. So it's like the people who already had the premium. I think this is called Premium Plus now, or something like that. But the people who are already paying. So like the incremental for them is going to be maybe $5 in terms of revenue for those people to like get some of those to lift. There might be some new come in. Here's what I think. I think that it's actually a smart way to start with like your best users, to get a little revenue, sort of cover your costs, figure it out. I do believe there will be a freemium Grok coming out in the first quarter. They're going to learn, they're going to put something out, and that'll be ad supported from the start.
And I do wonder, like, I know, social media being social media, it's not the issue of privacy is a little different, but I do wonder, I mean, there's been concern about, even with ChatGPT, about conversations becoming exposed or obviously in the enterprise side, but even on the personal side. And I do wonder, there are people who have private X feeds, or who, hide certain posts. And I do wonder if there's concern about whether
those get exposed, because it's just all in the same bucket. Yeah, I think that's sort of an interesting thing. I hadn't really considered that, but I think this is going to go broad. I think it's going to be like, think about like what's the best digital business? It's serving ads against search terms, right? Because you have user intent, and you're just lining that up with ways that they could spend money that's related to their intent. And I just fully expect that they're going to go freemium. There will be a premium, and the premium will be very limited, but like anyone, it's just like replace your search, with Grok, and let them do a few other things. And then they'll show some like in context ads against it. And maybe they'll pull those from, third-party marketplaces, not just their own, but like that looks like money on the table potentially for them.
Yeah, and I will say, I mean, it's a minor point, but I do always, especially because we're talking about, Musk and marketing and so on. I find sometimes the naming convention is kind of interesting. And I do find, as a science fiction fan, I find it a little confusing that in announcing it, Musk made a big point of saying how it's similar to the humor of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy by Douglas Adams. Yet the LLM is called Grok, which is a Robert A. Heinlein term from Stranger in a Strange Land. And both very interesting, important science fiction series, but very confusing to combine both of those in the same announcement.
No, I don't think so at all. One of them is the use case, the other is the idea, right?
Fair.
So I think it is the best branded solution in the space. Whether anyone likes it or not is like a whole different deal. This thing I've been listening to a new book that's out around the PayPal mafia. And this was a thing that Musk learned early on in his career. He sort of misnamed a company, and it was his first success, but he felt it was successful in spite of the fact that it was like a terrible name. And then since then, he's been very focused on that. And this, I don't know who came up with the name. It is the best branded solution in the space. If you're going to have some sort of chatbot, assistant, guru, whatever you want it to be, this idea of Grok, first of all, it's fairly easy to spell. You could misspell it, but it's like once you know it, you know it. There's no C in there, right?
Surprisingly, there's no X in there.
Like just Grok it, right? There's all of these things from a branding standpoint, which is good. Plus the people he's going after, like the super nerds, the super loyalists. A lot of them already know this term. A lot of them already use this term. They have an affinity for it, and so he's just like playing on that.
Well, yeah, and I was going to say, as Heinlein famously put a lot of political philosophy in his books, and Stranger in a Strange Land, Grok is very much part of that philosophy approach to thinking and communication. So,
I think you're reading too much into it on that side, but it's true. It's like very true. I just think it's like, yeah, people like me are going to like this. Right. And I think that's like what was in the room. And those are probably our first users anyway. So let's just go with it. But in any event, I think it was like super fun to talk about. It's like Musk, he knows how to make a headline. Yeah. Okay. So next story. I just want to make sure to, let's see. If I used X Twitter, I could see myself calling up Grok in a thread and asking you to verify something. Yes. Actually, I don't know who put this in, but this is a LinkedIn user. This is actually a really good point. It's like this idea of you could do inline verification. That's actually a really good idea, like maybe better than community notes, which I think are somewhat useful, somewhat popular at this point. But yeah, that's a really good idea. Plus, it's like pulling in other knowledge base and stuff like that. And like this idea we saw with Brad Abrams, with Bing Chat when we had them on Synthedia. And actually that video is up on YouTube if anyone wants to check it out. We talked about this idea that in Skype now you can actually add Bing Chat to it. So if you're talking to people now, like he and I were joking about it, it's like, is anyone using Skype? He's like, yeah, but it's so cool. And I'm like, yeah, okay, yeah, that is a good idea. And like Google Eila had that at one point as well, this idea that you could bring the bot into the conversation. And these are just more powerful bots. In Twitter, this actually is like the DM interaction there is a thing, or the thread interaction is a thing. If you can bring it into, it's either autonomously, like you just has permission to sort of join into the conversation, or like you request it to come in, that could actually just create more engagement, more interesting conversation. So whoever put that up there, thanks for adding that. Okay, let's move on. We've talked about, let's talk about the big news this week. Big news. Okay. So what is the big news? We had something in Synthedia, and we've got 2 stories from Eric as well on this. I've got the 12 things that matter from OpenAI Dev Day, and you've got OpenAI unveils custom GPTs, allowing anyone to build agents, and all the GPT-4 stuff, lots of features. Okay, so I'll just run through this because I think the lists are really easy for people to follow, and then like I want you to like break it all down for us. No code GPTs, they call them GPTs. You've got ChatGPT, you can customize it. I mean, that's it. Like you provide some things, you provide some background information, or you can actually upload your own knowledge base, which is super cool. And you're going to have your flavor of that. You can use it just for yourself. So it's like your little assistant, or you can share the link and other people can use it. And in the future, there's going to be a store, I think soonish. It's not really clear when that's going to be, but at the speed that OpenAI rolls things out, I would expect that it'll be probably first week in December. And you're going to be able to put those out there. Other people will be able to use them. There'll be a monetization angle. So that'll be cool. GPTs, like connecting them to third-party services. This is for the more custom development. So you've got the no-code version for most folks. But if you want to do something, if you're a developer or if you're a company, you're probably going to use the API. GPT-4 has the 128K context window. Actually, let's just talk about GPTs first. We'll go into the other stuff. Eric, tell me about GPTs. Thoughts?
Yeah, it makes sense. They've been moving in this direction for a while. I mean, this is where the APIs began. The idea was that a company or organization would incorporate their own data, their own knowledge bases into the LLM and have a custom version. And now it's just, well, what if you do that on a personal level? And every year more and more people have more and more information about themselves digitized anyway. So now you just go further in that direction. You keep putting in more information about who you are, what you're interested in, the kinds of data that you would want to know, or the kinds of information that is, or kinds of synthetic text that you'd be more interested in getting. And it can really build up a profile of you that can then make ChatGPT more useful, instead of having to constantly lay out scenarios of how you want ChatGPT to respond to you. It just does that automatically. I think it's a good idea. And I think the having them in a store, having sort of templates for custom versions in a store is a great idea. We talked last week about Poe testing out something like that and with creators and monetization. And this, I think, extends it to a higher level. I mean, the most obvious analogy, of course, is the App Store. But I think in some ways this is going to be more about how people want to interact with generative AI rather than about a specific tool like an app.
Well, so the question is App Store or Skill Store? And so is it iOS or is it Alexa? One of which like hugely successful, one of which not. I think it has the potential of being App Store just because there's just a lot more users when it comes down to it. And those users are hitting it with a significant frequency that you could actually gather a user base.
Yeah, and I think it's going to try to aim for both, because on one hand, if you are able to code and understand some of the systems behind ChatGPT, you could use it as a small business setup. But on the other hand, the no code means that, hey, like with Alexa skills, if you have a fun little idea, you can code it into a GPT and put it out there, and it might go viral, get some attention, and then inevitably be incorporated into the next version of ChatGPT.
Yeah, Roger Kibbe just sent me one last night that he'd been working on. Although for some reason I can't access it. I think it could be they've had the technical issues. Could also be just like in terms of the way they're rolling out access. But yeah, I think there's a couple different things. So first of all, right now you can basically customize your ChatGPT experience if you're a Plus user. I think it's only Plus users. Basically, you put profile information in, like here's the type of things I want back. Here's what I do. What this will allow you to do is basically create different personas for that. Right now, it's like if you want to change from one to another, you have to go back and cut and paste and that type of thing. So this, you could basically just have a battery of things, like depending on what you're doing, that you just select that as your sort of primary assistant. And the other thing around this idea that you can add your own knowledge base, you can just like upload PDFs and things like that. That's what we would normally call grounding. And so it's going to focus on that. Now it might pull from your data, but it also will use that as a cue about what's important. So even if it's going to general knowledge, it's going to do that. So I think that's super important. I suspect that the no code version is largely going to people are going to do a lot of these things just for fun, and maybe there'll be some like games, and there will be like obviously coaches, all sorts of coaches and gurus will show up in this type of thing. So that definitely will generate a lot more interest. The other thing I think is like it could be brilliant if it works. It's going to generate a lot of activity, but notice that they said 100 million weekly active users, not daily active users. So the question, so that's good, right? And so the monthly actives I think might actually be close to twice that, based on other data I've seen. Okay, daily active users. How do they get those? How do they convert those weeklies? Give them a reason to be there more often. And And then this idea that you can share the link, even starting, whether it's the marketplace now or just now, you can create it for yourself. You can just have it, or you can share a link. And so your friend can use it. That potentially could create a viral loop and just drive a lot more people to try it, but also more importantly, drive more people to use more frequently. So I think that's like a really thing about that. So Alan Furstenberg says, select that as your primary assistant. I think that's what's going to turn people off to the notion. People seem to just want one assistant that could do everything. This falls short of that. Yeah, I mean, you're with a smart, like that angle, like lines up nicely with a very smart guy called Adam Shire. I suspect they're going to have a primary. This might be hard for a lot of people, but I also think that people like customization. So, and this is a way to get that viral loop going, which would be sort of interesting. But Alan also said that discoverability is a really big question there. And I think, yes, that is super, super true. Anything else on GPTs before we go into like the API stuff?
Just that there's been leaks and rumors of related products coming out that will definitely take advantage of this sort of customization soon. Just that I think that we're going to see. Are
these things you can't talk about because you're sworn?
No, it's more that I'm skeptical of the timeline, although that seems to be the general consensus. But that the humane pin that's supposed to it will supposedly integrate with the ChatGPT and allow you to better create your own profile. I'm skeptical of it just as a timeline thing, but I do think that that's going to be people aren't going to like write an autobiography, but they will be more willing to just say, here's everything I did today, make a GPT out of it.
Yeah, very good. Hey folks, this is Gain, the Generative AI News Rundown. We meet every week since the beginning of the year and just talk about the biggest news in generative AI. We try to go a little bit further. We share some knowledge base here. You can read, most of these articles are covered, not all of them, but most of them are covered either in Synthedia. That's bit.ly/Synthedia. That's a daily newsletter on generative AI, the intersection of technology and business, and also on voicebot.ai, most of which is written by Eric. And that's the news, also in context, but like more volume for sure, a lot more stories. And then there's other things. We also have a twice weekly newsletter with just links of stuff that it's got stuff that we've written about and stuff that we just read and like can't get to, but we think is important. So that's, if you just go to like my profile in LinkedIn, I'm just Brett Kinsella, and you'll see you can sign up for that newsletter. And if you just want more links, and we feature data in there, a research paper, that type of stuff. Okay, so that's where all this stuff comes from. But I do want to continue the story around this announcement. So on the API side, maybe in a lot of ways, I think the more significant announcements, because it's more certain to be impactful. Whereas I think the GPTs is a little bit of a flyer. We don't know how that's going to play out yet. 128K context window. Obviously, that's Anthropic has had that very large context window to itself for a while in terms of that space if people needed it. Mistral is going to have something like that. They say that it can scale to that, but obviously GPT-4 is there, and faster, offers more control. This is like really important for enterprise users. This idea that they can have some repeatability or reliability associated with it, not reliability in terms of performance, but that like it's consistent in terms of the way it comes out. And there's a lot of things in here along those lines of just like overcoming what we would call objections from enterprise buyers. And one of those objections is cost, and GPT-4, super expensive compared to everything else. Now Turbo it's 50% or 30% input output. So that's really interesting. And then internal only GPTs that like enterprises will be able to create one just for their employees. Also really useful. We've seen companies do this like Morgan Stanley. We've seen Walmart. They're just creating these features to make it easier. And then there's this whole idea of custom models. So custom models that they'll actually, instead of just fine tuning, they'll actually help you build a custom model based on their data set. There's a lot of services associated with this from OpenAI, which is also fascinating. Number 9, they get senses. So vision, we've seen image output, but but vision to be able to analyze, and then the TTS is amazing. Copyright shield, again, overcoming that objection. I'm worried as a big business that you might put something in this output that is copyright protected, and then if my people use it, like, I'm going to be liable. So they're saying we're going to take care of that. Again, there's limitations. You have to be a ChatGPT enterprise customer or using the direct access API. So ChatGPT free, ChatGPT plus, you're out of luck. You don't get that. The assistance API is a way basically to do function calling. They were calling this agents, and but it's not agents the way we would typically think of agents. Everyone sort of like redefines the term. They're like, oh, that's a sexy term. Let's just change the definition so we can say we have that. But in any event, like, still very useful. It's a good framework. I think it's now the conclusion is it's fairly clear that this is going to replace plugins almost altogether. And then we have just no talk of plugins. Okay, so that's all the business side stuff. You wrote about this as well, Eric. Yeah. What stands out? What's most important?
First of all, I do wonder, I mean, it was a real rapid avalanche of information in that keynote. And obviously there's time afterward to look through it. But just thinking about the whole defining what an agent is, I think there is sometimes that blurring of the lines between a tool that has some abilities of an agent versus an actual fully independent AI agent, which is, as you said, this is not that. But I think that it's going to it's the kind of thing that's going to fill in a lot of gaps for companies who have been playing around with AI but don't necessarily have every feature that they want because of cost or time they need to invest in it, that now sort of like taken care of. And as you said, I mean, costs going down, power going up, integrating all the sensory visual abilities, upgrading the text to speech in a way that is, it sounded really good when they were doing the presentation. And I think that there's just there's going to be a real shift in terms of whether it's directly from OpenAI or through Azure or through some other partner. This is going to be built into the foundation of a lot of business IT systems, and just sort of like a thing you have to learn if you want to be involved in information technology going forward on a business front.
Yeah, that's a fair statement. Alan Furstenberg said he's already seeing some reports that while it has the 128 context window, it tends to really ignore context past 64K, which is kind of interesting. So it's people are analyzing it and they can see that it can sort of get halfway there. Context maintenance is like very important and very difficult. And I think what most people have learned is that the 4K context windows are just like way insufficient if you have any multi-turns. Certainly you can't upload big documents as well. 8K is probably okay for most use cases, but you really, for some use cases, you just really need, well beyond that. And 64K is probably okay for most use cases. And I think even 32, which they were supporting previously, probably would be.
Yeah, and I think it's also telling that they talked a little bit about one of the companies they work with on the sensory side that helps people with disabilities, which obviously is a really huge market that I often feel is a unaddressed but gigantic secondary market every time there's a new AI tool.
Yes.
I think that you're going to see this become a really important part of of what those who work with people with disabilities, or those who work with, especially with kids, when they're like trying to help them adapt to being independent, and suddenly there's this really simple tool that is really good at explaining what's around the world to someone with vision impairment. I mean, that's not a small thing, especially when you consider how quickly it learns as well and adapts to, and you combine that with the personalization element, and suddenly
yeah, absolutely. And just like on this, so we've got the GPTs, which is sort of, I think of it as more the consumer-ish, although small business, there's a lot of things around those. So that's a really significant. Then we have all the platform things, and those sort of, we break those down to the non-functional, which is like costs, latency, context window, and then the functional, and those are just the tools, the improved function calling, the control, vision, those types of things, just more features. And so altogether, actually, this is really significant. And hey, folks out there, if you are on LinkedIn or YouTube, just give us a like. We'd appreciate that. You can share it with people too, or you can subscribe to the YouTube channel. That's always amazing. But just give it a like. We always appreciate it. I always forget to mention that to people. So there's been a lot of talk about OpenAI and the hours following that event. How many companies did it kill in that? And I think the answer is none. I think it's like they may freeze the market, which might create a slow death for some people, or because they're like, well, maybe I'll just wait around to see if this OpenAI stuff works out, as opposed to trying some sort of best of breed in another area. But I actually think the people who are the biggest under risk are speech recognition, just because like Whisper's super good, and it's going to be good enough for a lot of folks. I'm not sure about the voice synthesis because they're not really pushing that much, but it is really good. And there's a lot of people in that space, and the improvement has gone very significant. Has gone up a lot recently, but that's very good. But I really feel like the people most at risk are there. Maybe character AI's got they're going to impact a lot of businesses for sure.
I will say, yeah, the one thing they didn't really mention, but I feel like is just a matter of time. The second OpenAI announces their gaming platform or gaming company partner, that's going to cause some real chaos. And
yes, that's a great point. Yeah, I hadn't really thought about it. Yeah, people aren't thinking about entertainment enough because these are like productivity tools, and that's great. Like the productivity revolution is super important, but this whole entertainment aspect like going to be really important.
Yeah.
All right, let's see. Alan said, I saw you mentioned the TTS in passing. There are interesting elements about that. Jumped out to me as a developer. Well, you can just tell us what those are, Alan. Maybe you're typing right now.
I think I was just going to say, I think TTS is often a less considered aspect of whether it's a software app or a product in general, but now maybe it'll be the thing where it's like you just automatically include it the way that you automatically include English as a language option in the list of things you do. It's just a thing that's there.
Well, what I've noticed from most developer standpoints, most people don't want to build, like there are people who have companies around this, but most people don't want to build speech to text, so speech recognition, and they don't want to build text to speech. Like if you're an application developer, you just want to buy those components, and for a long time people just oh, Google's got something or Amazon's got something. That's easy for me. So I think path of least resistance, just what's easy and what's good. And so I think that's the thing. I really wonder about sort of that plumbing level, which a lot of people think rapidly commoditizes.
Yeah, and then just think about when it connects to those GPTs, and the custom voice that actually develops over time to sound like someone you want to listen to or sound like you.
Yeah, yeah, and Alan said a couple of things here. No SSML, but that might be a little esoteric for some of the people who are watching here. But you can stream the audio, which is actually really significant, so you don't have to wait. So yeah, thanks, Alan, for weighing in on that. That's great. Okay, so we had other. Let's just keep talking about OpenAI. This is the OpenAI show. Generative AI. We're just, instead of calling it Generative AI News, we're just going to call it OpenAI News every week. At least today, there's a lot going on here. So we have this other story where ChatGPT. I've got ChatGPT suffers DDoS. It's really OpenAI suffered a DDoS attack. Multiple outages yesterday. Anthropic was also down. It was interesting. I had a meeting up in Washington, and I was driving home. So I had a long drive, and I just stopped, pulled over to grab some food really quickly. I'm like, well, I'm just gonna check in on this story because we'd seen a blip in the big thing in the morning, a little blip in the afternoon, and it's like, oh, geez, there's another one going on. This was about 6 last night. So I just sat at the restaurant, and banged out the story so that the Synthetia readers could see it. And this first image here wasn't there. This first image says, update, we're dealing with periodic outages due to abnormal traffic, a pattern reflective of a DDoS attack. Now, if we go down a little further, it's got these whole types of things which we're currently investigating an issue. We're continuing to investigate. We've identified the problem. We've made a fix. So we had a couple rounds of that. And then, so that's what was available when I first wrote this. And so I just wrote down and said, hey, like, I like, there's a lot of reasons that this could happen. And, you know, we see the down detector numbers, but it's repeating. That's very interesting, right? And it's repeating at times which you might not expect it to. And Anthropic going down at the same time. There could be a number of reasons. Like the Occam's razor approach would be like, there's probably, usually you say Occam's razor, you say there's no coordination, right? Because coordination is complex. And so so they'd say it's just like coincidental that two of the top 3 or 4 LLM platforms had outages at the same time. And then I was just like, oh, by the way, like Claude, it's not just that they were slow or had an issue. During the business day, they did unscheduled maintenance. Claude AI took it down. I'm like, okay, there's something going on here. And so I was like, okay, so it could all be these things. And then I get home like 3 hours later, and I just happened to like pull it up, and I'm like, oh, now they're admitting there's a DDoS. Of course, that was like one of the things. I said, like, it could be some sort of coordinated attack. Why is no one talking about that?
Yeah, and it's like the most innocent explanation is that there was an issue with ChatGPT and OpenAI, and all these people then went over to Claude and suddenly overwhelmed it because they couldn't use ChatGPT. But the DDoS attack definitely makes sense. I've seen reports that hacker groups, sort of malicious hacker groups, have been taken credit for, which, you know, always take with a grain of salt, but they are supposedly showing some evidence that they're behind the DDoS attack. So it may be that is part of it too. But I do wonder if ChatGPT or OpenAI had an issue with cybersecurity where they weren't really taking it as seriously as some people thought they should. There was they had no bug bounty program. They had no real system set up for like addressing issues that people found using it and reporting it. They eventually set that up, and I wonder if they have, as we saw during the Dev Day, they have the full and complete support of Microsoft and its gigantic infrastructure. So I wonder how many conversations about those kinds of security.
I bet there's more today. I bet they're having more conversations. And this whole thing too is like, we're having a conversation with Mikhail Stanislawic on LinkedIn today. We're sort of back and forth on this, and hat tip to him, because I think he was the first place that you and I saw it, because he noticed and the surface was down fairly quickly. He's just like, well, if it was DDoS, they would have known it. I think it was. I don't think they did know it, because within hours of the initial fix, basically Sam Altman just did a happy dance and said, "Hey, sorry," it's like a humble brag. Yeah, it's going to be a little intermittent. We're going to have some trouble because we're so darn popular, right? And although I wouldn't put it past anybody from just like intentionally misleading their customer base, I don't think they knew at that time. And I think you have to understand how cybersecurity or cyber attacks have changed over the years, that a lot of times you don't want to do like the big attack initially, because then all defenses go up. And like, you want it to like drip, become painful. The other thing that happens is a lot of times they just do these things just to probe defenses. So so then when they're preparing for something bigger, they know how to inflict maximum damage.
And while the API was affected, I tried to find it. It didn't seem like the Azure side of things was having issues, which again, Microsoft obviously very formidable cybersecurity measures in place.
Yeah, it's a separate instance, right? Yeah. So and so that's like the big thing. It's like, will this matter? And I think to a certain extent they're going to get a free pass right now. I mean, first of all, I don't think it would have mattered much anyway, because no one's using it for mission critical, so it's like it wasn't a big issue. And it's like, oh geez, I couldn't write my blog post, right? So, but the fact that they get a DDoS attack, like everyone will sort of give them a free pass. Probably you should fix that. But again, like this, we come back to this thing. Some of these people who write about this space, like they just don't get it. They're like, oh, if they're going through Azure, OpenAI is not benefiting from that. No, that's not true. OpenAI actually does benefit from that. And then they don't have all the downside risk. And so if you are a business, and I've actually talked to a couple of businesses in the last week, there's like, oh yeah, we'll try it on the API. But if we're going production, we're going through Azure. There's just no question about it. Like they don't even there's no way we're going to rely on OpenAI to have a reliable system with an SLA. It's just not going to happen.
They're also it's obviously it's all relative, but as a company, company OpenAI, they're really tiny relative to some of the impact they're having. So it's not shocking that they don't have a huge cybersecurity department.
And this is Alan Furstenberg. Like, Alan, you're the star of the show. I should have just invited you. We could have had you on because you've got all these great things. Also, keep in mind, they may not have the most experienced staff. This is the same thing that happened in Italy. They were building an API, and all of a sudden they had a consumer app out, and they didn't have people on staff that sort of understood the basics of consumer app security. And so they made this. Well, it wasn't just Italy. Italy was the one that was the first reaction to it, but they exposed a bunch of PII potentially to the internet. And they may not have been able to detect the difference between an overuse and an attack. And I think that's exactly it. I think you're coming off a high, your bias is, oh, we just opened something up. People love it. And it just happens to be coincident with attack. So it takes them a while to figure that out. And I think that's really the issue. The company's grown so fast, so quickly, they don't have all those components in place, but now they don't really have much choice. They've got to ramp that side up quickly, even though it's not sexy like GPTs.
Well, I know. Well, that's what I always think about when we see these gigantic, speaking of Anthropic, they getting billions of dollars in investment, and it sounds insane, but not inconsiderable amount is just purely hire a lot of people very quickly to do all the basic things you need a big business to do.
Yeah, exactly. And that's even harder. I know where the ML engineers are. I'm in that industry. I'll just go poach them. But where are the people who are going to do back office security and stuff like that? And maybe Andrew, if you look it up, I don't Anthropic too. What do they have? 100 people over there? It's it's not a lot. It's OpenAI certainly has more, but that's not a lot either. So you don't have in-depth defense cybersecurity team, staffed by 20 people, but you're going to need that.
And as powerful as these AI things are, the number one thing every company needs is the talent behind the scenes to run things when things go wrong.
Oh, geez. This is like the Alan Furstenberg show.
Yeah.
Another good point. And to tie this back to the previous discussion, this is why I'm dubious about their ability to pull off the App Store and revenue sharing right out of the gate. Exactly. And again, you're right. You're aligned really well with Adam Chyer. If you don't know Adam Chyer, co-founder, technical founder of Siri and Viv Labs, which became Bixby. So the technical creator of 2 of the top 4 voice assistants ever to grace the face of the earth. He's basically, you're basically doing a business to business, and you're doing a business to consumer business. They're very different things. How can you scale?
And you sit down with Microsoft, and Microsoft says, "Oh, here are some ideas. What ideas do you have?" Microsoft says, "Yeah, great." Not thinking, "Oh, wait, we're Microsoft. We already have hundreds of people who could immediately do this right now."
Yeah, Anthropic, 51 to 200 employees, or depending on how you look at it. I think they're around 100, maybe 150, depending on how the things are going. All right, so. Geez. What are we going to do next? We've got so many stories. So let's skip ahead. We're just going to do rapid fire. Then we're going to do winners and losers of the week. Maybe we'll come back to some of these next week. Cause I know a lot of you are having a good time. Please give us a like, subscribe to YouTube if you're there. But we'll let you get back to your life as well. You got things to do, but we'll do only rapid fire. Sure. For now. All right. So we've got Aleph Alpha, one of the other contenders for OpenAI of Europe, Mistral being sort of the other one, landed 500 million. I think really important. They, out of Germany, they talk about data sovereignty, they're trying to have something where they have instances in the countries that you're in, use that. That might be a good differentiator. I don't know. But they're trying to make it a really powerful solution as well. Any quick thoughts on Aleph Alpha? You wrote about them as well.
Just that it is the European model, which is saying, all right, we're going to be in a heavily regulated area. Let's start there, build a product that fits into that system. And therefore, these businesses that are a little more conservative in their investments, and the governments that obviously have to be a little more careful in their tech choices will sign up and use us. And it's the investors behind this really tell the story that this is going to be where the blue chip style companies and again the governments go to for generative AI services.
There are going to be one or two anointed alternatives to OpenAI, and I think it's plausible that one of them will be in Europe. I'm not sure that's likely, but I think it's plausible. So we'll see. 500 million could start, but as we know in the space, that's not enough to differentiate yourself. So let's see. I think but they are really focused on this idea of regulated industries, more data protection. It's a good angle to take. So I give them a chance. I give them a chance. All right, so IBM launches $500 million enterprise AI venture fund. We don't need to go into great detail on this, but the big players are saying, "Hey, we're here." They participated in the big Hugging Face round from August. I'm not sure how much they put in. That was like a 230 round or something like that. So maybe they put 50, 100 in. But that's just out there. Like, if you're out there raising money, you might IBM. I don't know how many good deals they're seeing, so that might be good. There's another company. I don't even know how you say this. Is Eila?
I think it's Eila.
Yeah, Eila. Okay, so Eila, a very small round, but we just like big companies. Like, okay, so one company raised 500 million, another raised 1.5 million. It's either euros or pounds. I think it's euros. They're out of the UK. And they're basically just like, okay, here's what we've been talking about. You're going to have a few general purpose solutions, and then you're going to have custom solutions, domain specific. They're just trying to help VCs, which is sort of brilliant. Like, if your business plan is to do something that's a little broader than this, like, why don't we just make the thing for VCs? Because then when we're raising money, we can show them how they could use it. So every pitch meeting becomes a sales meeting.
This feels exactly like what IBM would want to invest in.
Yeah, maybe. Okay, so you have another one. So we've got Grok, but we also have Gauss.
Yes, Gauss. Samsung. It's funny. There's so many stories about Apple scrambling to catch up, running to try to do stuff. There are other big tech companies out there who are just as eager to be part of it. Samsung is one of them.
And they have something that Apple does not.
They
also announced something, and Apple's just said, "Oh yeah, it's going to be amazing when it shows up." And
Samsung jumped right in. They have an LLM for text. They have an image service. They have a coding AI assistant. If you are a company that likes Samsung or uses a lot of Samsung products, you have plenty of options that are built right in there. And I think
and a user base.
Yeah, and also it's not addressed all the time, but South Korea has a lot of really powerful tech companies. Samsung is a really big player in that space. We've talked about how SK Telecom is jumping into the Anthropic boat, but I think Samsung is not going to give up a market share that is enormous in certainly in Asia. And I think it might not be huge in America, certainly anytime soon, but I don't think it's going to be unprofitable for them.
Yeah, so we'll see. I mean, I think I always feel like Samsung gets part of the way there, and then like it's just not quite as. I mean, in fact, they usually have great technology, but like there's always something missing from like the adoption user feature side. Like,
their smart home story is exactly that. It's really great, but it came a little late, or was a little off, or wasn't quite integrated into other things. Yeah.
Okay. You had another story here. Give me 20 seconds on this. Brave adds generative AI assistant. So they're just like, what did Opera do? We're going to do this now.
Yeah, basically the thing of where these assistants coming into play. One of them is going to be integrated into browsers, and there's not a huge number of popular web browsers, but Brave is certainly one that those who are interested in that privacy element are keen on, and they're not going to lose people because they don't have a generative AI assistant. So now they have one too.
Wix, this is actually they've launched this now. I think they announced it actually a few weeks ago. We've talked about this in the past, but Wix started out this whole idea. It's like, oh, this is kind of a burden on people, small businesses, to create websites. Why don't we just like make it easy? And so now they're making it easier by automating the process.
Yeah, well, it was they were starting to test it a few weeks ago. Now it's more widely available, but yeah, they went from having tools for generating website content to a full-on text to website engine, and now they're acknowledging the fact that as all these things are moving in toward the interactive direction, where it's like you describe what you want and then you have back and forth to better refine what you're looking for, and Wix has your website ready to go, full of e-commerce options and everything else you need.
Yeah, I think it's brilliant. I mean, like I was just telling somebody yesterday, it's like, look for anything that automates white collar work. That's it. That's like anything like that. That's what this revolution. That's like the immediate application. It's like these knowledge worker stuff, these things that are highly educated. Anything you can do to make that faster, or just make it instantly available. That's something that you can base a business around.
When you say white collar, I think white collar, especially entry level white collar.
Yes, but also, like, I think one of the things I was talking to someone about this yesterday. It's the people who are already the most productive actually become more productive with this. So it's like even like further down the road, but like you're absolutely right. It gets people up to speed faster. It raises the floor of what everyone can do. And then at the top end, it just like accelerates what the best people can do, which is cool.
Yeah, and it's that thing where in the most optimistic vision, it's you're a really creative person who has great ideas and you're good at visual design or maybe writing or something, and suddenly you have this tool that does everything else, and you bring your special element to it, and it's done for you.
Which is precisely what we've seen in the gaming space. This idea that like you're a designer, we'll give you the developer side as a co-pilot. If you're a developer, we'll give you the designer side as a co-pilot. So it's really, really clever. Grammarly, yeah, they're just like chugging away. Last I checked, they had 30 million monthly active users. So they've got a nice base of customers to roll this stuff out to.
Yeah, I mean, I love Grammarly, and I think you talk about white collar work. Sometimes so much of that is just communication, whether it's presentations, emails, or products themselves. And Grammarly's always been very keen on being ahead of the game in terms of making it useful for not just an industry but for individuals. And now they're saying like, you write a million emails a year, put that into Grammarly, and suddenly Grammarly can. You tell what you want it to do, it will write it as though you wrote it yourself. And that's not nothing.
And I have a beef with Grammarly, but it's really a beef with myself because we write so much stuff. And like sometimes, like last night, I'm sitting in a fast food restaurant off the highway writing a story about the DDoS attack, and Grammarly wasn't working properly. And so, but I just like, for us, it's not that like we couldn't do it. It just saves us so much time that it helps us like figure out punctuation or misspellings or things like that. And like when I was updating it 4 hours later, because there was new news, I was like, oh geez, Grammarly must not have been working because I was on a weak connection. And I was just like, oh, it just drives me nuts when I have like a little typo or there's an extra word that shouldn't be there. And
I mean, I essentially have a personal dictionary through Grammarly because of all the company names and technical terms we use.
Yeah, exactly. So Grammarly, great tool. And it's just sort of an obvious place that people would sort of add this to. Yeah, this is kind of interesting. YouTube, generative AI chatbot and content summaries. I mean, maybe we should just talk about this next week.
Yeah, I'll just say that there's the on the consumer side, there's the creative where you want to put stuff out there and it helps you with that, and then there's the consumption side, which is that there's a lot of content out there. It's sometimes hard to find the thing that you want within all that content. So if somebody can tell you, yeah, they talk about this topic within this 3 hour long video, here's where you can find it, or there's all these comments, you want to avoid the bad ones.
We need to find another time to talk about this in more detail, because I think like YouTube search is just terrible. It's because they're optimizing towards just like trying to get you to click on something.
They don't want you to find things. They want you to absorb everything.
Exactly. They're like, I think you'll like this. And it's like, that's not what I'm looking for. Yeah. It's the same thing that's happened with sort of Google search in general. So they're optimizing for things that aren't user-centric, which I think is their biggest risk. We're not going to talk about this now because we don't have enough time. I know people have to get back to work, but GitHub Copilot's announcements yesterday are very significant. The GitHub Copilot chat is broadly available. I'll talk about this. This is a killer app of generative AI, probably more so than everything else, like right now, in terms of this, like the way that people are incorporating it into their daily activities for professional skills. So there's a lot to talk about here on the GitHub front, but I think what they've done right now is they're just making it really hard for anyone else to catch up. I think you'd mentioned Tab 9 just announced a raise. I'm sure we'll talk about that next week. Obviously Google Cody is out there, Code Whisperer from Amazon. Maybe you're not, if you're a GitHub shop, you don't have to be a Microsoft shop, so that's helpful. But like, if you're not a GitHub shop, maybe you shop, or you're really focused on Google, maybe you use those other things. But They're just moving very quickly, and there's some really interesting things there. So we'll talk about that next week. But I think we should conclude with winners and losers of the week. But before we do this, hey, this has been Gain, Generative AI News Rundown. If you have winners and losers of the week in generative AI, put them in the chat. Give us a like on LinkedIn or YouTube. We definitely appreciate it. And always, even when we're leaving, you can just let us know you were here and what you liked about it. That's always great for us. So what do you want to start with, winner or loser?
Do you want to start loser? We started winner last time, so.
Okay, give me a loser.
I think I'm gonna have to say, even though I agree that OpenAI didn't like destroy every startup out there. I think there were a lot of people working on
wrapper businesses,
personalized. What?
Wrapper businesses? Any wrapper just around the API? Tough.
Yeah, I think there were a lot of people working on that, and a lot of people who had ideas for it that now. Will be 80% of the way toward that immediately just through what OpenAI put out there. So I suspect a lot of emails about re-strategizing or hard conversations with potential investors, maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. Little advice out there that if you're building one of those things, you need to build beyond the model. So if it's just the model, like, why are people going to use you? You've got to have something else. And so like we have a lot of these existing businesses that provide a lot of value to professionals for all these other features, and then the model adds to it. You can take the model as your core, but you just need to innovate beyond the model. I'd say that's generally a good strategy. Losers this week, I think it's the speech recognition, speech to text companies. I think the improvements in Whisper are just going to accelerate. And so it's like a little thing, like no one's paying attention to it, but that's a very competitive space. It's also very important for a number of sectors. And so it's not to say that if you're a custom player, you're building custom models, you better technology. It's not to say you can't succeed. You can. But I think we're at a point now where Whisper might become sort of that de facto standard that Google has been up to this point. You got a winner for me?
Yeah, and it's maybe not going to be immediately obvious, but I do think that between what Wix is doing, what OpenAI is doing, I do think that small businesses are, there's that revolution in e-commerce where suddenly a business of 3 people could theoretically do just as well in terms of selling things as Walmart. And I do think that there's going to be a similar kind of revolution now where a small business that has like a really specific specialty will have the customer service and the website capabilities of a much, much larger business.
Yeah. I'd say the big winner I have is anybody using GPT 3.5 Turbo who needs a little improvement in quality. The really significant reduction in price of GPT-4 is going to help make their businesses more viable as they scale. And, I think it's just like, we had Brad Abrams from Bing Chat on at Synthesia 4, and the video's up on YouTube. You guys should go check it out. If you want to learn about what it was like to wrangle GPT-4, what Bing is doing from a search standpoint, Brad lays it all out. No one's ever talked about it this way before. Yeah. There's a lot of gems in there. So I'll have a write-up on that. I'm going to have a write-up on GitHub Copilot advances as well in the next couple of days. But you should definitely look at that. But we just think about this idea that he said, yes, we understand there's issues with cost. We understand there's issues with latency, but we had to go quality first. If we're looking at a behavior change, if we're looking at something newer, it's got to be better or else they won't change. And he said, so we just took the best model and we're making it work. And they have done a lot of improvements on all those sides. And I think we're going to get much further. So I think that anybody who's been relying on these things, I think you might just have a big step up in quality, with a more reasonable cost than what we were looking at. And you know what? I think that's it for today. Do you agree?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say we did about a third of what we were potentially going to cover, which is about right every week, I'd say, based on how much news comes in.
This is a big week. You guys, like, if you came in halfway through, like, look this up, or we'll tomorrow in Synthesia, I'm sure we'll have a list of all the links for all the stories. You should really pay attention to a few of these things that happen because they are significant. There's things every week that appear to be significant. This week in particular had a confluence of events, and then we have Microsoft Ignite next week. So I think we're going to see a lot of things next week as well.
Yeah, and I think we're about to see, especially ahead of the holidays, I think the hardware wave is coming.
Oh, okay. Let's leave it there. All right, folks. I hope you enjoyed it. This is Gaines, Generative AI News Rundown. Give us a like on the way out the door. Let us know you were here. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye, everyone.